What if I told you that Blackbeard might not even be the person calling all the shots on his own crazy Yonko crew? First impression, pretty insane statement, right? But well, maybe actually not, because as I've been rereading and reanalyzing One Piece, one man has stuck out very suspiciously recently to me: the demon sheriff himself, navigator of the Blackbeard pirates and one of the Titanic captains, Lafitte. This man, or whatever he is shrouded in more mystery sauce at this point than even Shanks, and I do think we're finally on his trail. Is he a holy knight? Is he a pawn of Emu? Or just the greatest anarchist in the last 3,000 years? Well, today, I hope with you together, we can get to the bottom of it. Who is Lafitte? Like, really, seriously, this dude isn't just mysterious or underdeveloped. I kind of get really freaked out by him whenever he actually appears in the story because, like most people in my life, he's very suspicious, I think. He's kind of giving out to getcha ooga booga boogeyman vibes a little bit, right? It's not just me thinking this, yeah? Good, alright, so let's look into that a little bit more, shall we? What do we already actually know about Lafitte that can actually help us unravel his deepest, darkest, and tightest secrets? What's really going on with the Demon Sheriff? Well, we do know that he's one of the earliest members of the Blackbeard Pirates, serving directly under Marshal D. Teach since way back in Jaya, and probably even long before that. And strictly speaking, just on paper, his role seems fairly simple. He's the navigator and effectively the chief of staff of the crew and the 5th Titanic captain of the fleet. But as I started digging into him, the shovel of truth started uncovering some details that, quite frankly, I kind of forgot about, and some of them I just learned about for the first time, I think, because I kind of overlooked them. And that's fine. It's kind of hard to keep all this stuff sorted. Honestly, it's not like One Piece is the shortest story of all, but in the Elbaf era, well, a lot of these details that Oda tossed out kind of feel way more deliberate now than you or I probably noticed back when they were first dropped, way back hundreds and hundreds of chapters ago. And since I know that someone, or a lot of someones, are gonna ask, the reason I'm talking about Lafitte with you now, of all times, is because he's one of the big remaining players in the final saga that somehow it feels we still know nothing about, despite how very clearly important they are to the story. You probably know at this point because I bring it up a lot, but I've been rereading the entire story in Japanese, and even as recently as the Elbaf arc, we're getting information about Lafitte, but still don't really know anything, almost like an even more suspicious Brook. Speaking of which, a prime example, I think, of something that we know about Lafitte that's way more interesting now than ever is that, much like Brook, Lafitte is from the West Blue. Now, surely that fact by itself already not a coincidence, right? The West Blue. We've learned a shocking, surprisingly large amount about this corner of the sea recently, and apparently it's just riddled with important characters, deep lore, and just the origins of the strongest characters in the entire world. Brook, who is somehow connected to Gunko, is one of them. Then Teach, Shanks, and Shamrock, they're all from God Valley in the West Blue. So are their parents technically, Zebek, Edis, and Magnolia. And of course, my goats over on that burned up island of Ohara, Robin, Cloudy, Clover, Albia, etc, etc. I also think that Hero looks from Ohara. Anyways, sure, that alone doesn't prove anything really, but it does kind of mean that Lafitte isn't coming from some random corner of the map that kind of suggests that there's nothing important about where he's from. No, he's coming from a region that has just repeatedly, over and over, been tied to major world-shaking events, lore, and some of the biggest mysteries in the final saga. I'm kinda starting to see your game, Lafitte. You know ball. Now, next, let's look at his design and presentation, because they're like very interesting too. Like my parents always said, it's what on the outside that really counts with a human being. And I think in Lafitte's case, it really got my theory gears shifting when I critically looked at how he walked, talked, and just overall held himself in the story. First up, very interestingly, he dresses extremely formally, almost like some aristocrat or old world gentleman, right? He also wears a tall top hat, he carries a cane, and also speaks with this exaggerated politeness, and even his posture feels, well, just very theatrical. All in all, he's kind of like evil Brooke, really? Like, okay, I'm not the only person to point this out, obviously. I think it was Daksake who made a whole video on Lafitte and Brooke being matched up to fight based on like their designs and appearances, but that was actually before the entire Brooke, Gunko, fun, exciting stuff on Elbaf. So yeah, these guys definitely parallel each other, and it's that connection really, I think, that really makes it feel like Lafitte's got some deeper stuff going on that Oda is still hiding from us. Oh, also, he wears a giant feathered boa wrapped around his shoulders post-time skip, which immediately just reminds me of another flamboyant pirate aristocrat with some very deep secrets. Don Quixote, Dofi, Doflamingo. Yeah, he's a D2. I don't know, man. It's kind of creepy looking at Lafitte. He talks like someone who grew up in a very structured, upper-class environment. His vocabulary is so extremely formal, even in Japanese, or maybe even especially in Japanese. And every action feels controlled and extremely calculated and deliberate. Even when this man is threatening someone, he does it with the calm tone of a butler, and butlers, if I know anything, are very scary, man. But with or without all this introductory stuff, you can probably understand why I kind of feel like just instinctually this dude has some sort of tie to the Holy Land specifically, right? Like between his vibes, his attitude, and even his title of Demon Sheriff, he's just oozing the energy of a man connected to the abyss itself. That's at least the direction that I'm kind of leaning towards at least, but let's keep pushing forward into his actual powers. Now, in case you somehow missed this, because you might have forgotten about it, Lafitte can actually just casually sprout angel wings from his back. Yeah, that's the thing. And considering that he's part of, you know, Teach's crew, that pretty much shows off that he probably has a powerful devil fruit, probably his own, and maybe even one of the 5 flying legendary devil fruits. What a dumb thing. Remember when that was a thing in One Piece? A lot of devil fruits can fly. I don't even know what the count is. Anyways, then he can also hypnotize people. At least that's what's used as an explanation, you know, kind of like placeholder thing for him getting actually the gates of justice opened during Marineford and Impel Down for Blackbeard and his crew. And based on these 2 traits, I feel fairly confident predicting his devil fruit. I believe that it's a mythical human fruit or a mythical bird fruit model siren. Now, in many mythologies, sirens were these bird-like women who used hypnotic songs to lure sailors into their deaths, right? They were creatures of deception, manipulation, and seduction at sea. Now, I haven't seen a siren with a cane and a top hat yet, but if I did, I bet they'd look just like Lafitte. Lafitte? And honestly, it kind of feels pretty clear to me at this point because it kind of fits the pirate mythos and the mythical zone vibe and works really nicely with Lafitte's role in the crew and just his entire toolkit. And it kind of also, you know, the sirens do appear in the Odyssey, like Homer's Odyssey, and you know, One Piece is a modern Odyssey, so how fitting that it would have some sirens as well. But kind of to be real with you here, none of the fruit stuff is really gonna be crazy important today anyways, because the real big thing that's going to be essential to unraveling Lafitte is actually his movements. Not like how his body is all janky, but kind of more like where the guy goes and what information he just casually seems to have. He actually did just an insane feat the moment we met him because he casually snuck into Marijua undetected by the fleet admiral and all the warlords gathered there. Now, I don't think I can stress this enough. This is the capital of the world government with the Gorosei and Imu and the National Treasure, like the most heavily guarded location in the entire world. At that point, it was not under siege like how Snabo managed to snuck in. He's not Shamrock, who was recently actually confirmed by Oda to have been the person to have met with the Gorosei. He is Lafitte, and he made everyone in this room and everyone who was in Mauritius just look very silly. This random pirate officer somehow bypassed the Marines, Cypher Pole, and presumably even some of the Holy Knights and says, "My man Teach, by the way, should be a warlord," which is my best Lafitte impression, by the way. And then the guy just dips. It's really sick, and it's always been really messing with my brain, man. Like, on top of that, he seems to keep tabs on Monkey D. Dragon somehow, the leader of the Revolutionary Army, who's, you know, kind of meant to be this most secretive person that no one knows where and how he operates, and kind of is the worst babysitter of all time. But really, what should matter to me and you here is that somehow Lafitte can track down a man whose location even the world government, with their crazy assets and resources and like 13 different private spy organizations, have a struggle to keep track of. And then there's his weird loyalty to Blackbeard, which might just be, you know, the most suspicious part of his entire character. Lafitte is arguably the most attentive and respectful member in that entire bunch, correcting his own crewmates on how to properly call Teach Daddy Admiral instead of just Captain. And when Avalo Pizarro, you know, the island man, jokes about replacing Teach as Captain, Lafitte immediately threatens to kill the man. Why do I find that weird? I mean, he's the captain, so surely loyalty isn't like exactly a red flag in a pirate crew. Well, sure in general, but that's just literally not how Blackbeard crews operates in general. They are all selfish and mutually work together for their own personal gains. They can be loyal, but Lafitte's loyalty is kind of like Zoro to Luffy, right? Something that Teach does not have from the rest of his crew, like Luffy. So why then does he treat Teach less like a pirate captain and much more like a king? Well, the next step in this puzzle is looking at his origins. His real origins. You see, like many characters in One Piece, Lafitte was actually named after a real-life pirate in our world called Jean Lafitte, but, well, that's actually not exactly accurate either. Turns out there are two historical figures that he's actually named after, Jean Lafitte and Pierre Lafitte, the bamboozling brothers of France. Now, in case you don't know your 1800 lore, these two pirate brothers were pirates and smugglers in the Gulf of Mexico during the early 1800s. They did your normal pirate activities, but it kind of went a little bit darker than just that as well. These two guys were deeply involved in slave trade, then also acted as pirates and privateers, and then even later in their lives, they also served as spies and informants, cooperating with governments when it just basically suited them best, kind of taking from everyone, you know, just throwing people under the bus, grabbing what they could, playing with people's lives. The worst of the worst. So what could this possibly tell us about the character Lafitte? Well, it kind of shows us many hats that Lafitte could possibly wear. Pirate, slave trader, spy, all things, by the way, that just scream to me, Celestial Dragon! Right? Yeah. His formal speech, his aristocratic demeanor, the dramatic clothing, even his weird obsession with titles and hierarchy and, you know, respect to the top dog. To me, it all feels oddly similar to the behavior patterns we've already seen from the Holy Knights, Dofi, and, I don't know, that guy. So if Lafitte is actually connected to the Celestial Dragons, it suddenly opens up several very interesting possibilities for where Oda might take that character. So let's unravel the three that make the most sense to me in part 2. Lafitte the Pair. The first possibility is one of the more chaotic theories we'll talk about today. What if there is more than one Lafitte? What if there are two Lafittes? Lafitte? Lafoots? What's the plural of Lafitte? Well, now yes, I am quite sure this sounds a little bit insane. Hell, even a little bit crackpot, as the kids would say these days. But dear viewer, I implore you to consider that Mr. Eiichiro One Piece Oda has recently started playing with this idea a lot more openly. The concept of characters having secret counterparts or hidden identities has kind of been popping up in several different locations throughout the story recently. I mean, look no further than Shanks and Shammy, the twin Wonder Boys of God Valley. You might remember I've proposed the idea that they are actually working together in the past, but what if it's not actually them? What if there's a second brotherly duo of pirates and the world government? Well, I guess technically a third, because I guess Dofi and Rocinante exist too. I miss Rocinante, but I kind of imagine something like this. One Lafitte is the pirate that we know, the navigator of the Blackbeard pirates. He's weird, creepy, and part bird. The other Lafitte might be something else entirely, someone we're bound to meet at some point. A holy knight, an elite warrior saving under Big Moo. Moo! Right? If that were the case, then suddenly a lot of strange details would start to make a lot more sense, I think. For example, Lafitte's infiltration of Marijua suddenly becomes a lot less mysterious if, you know, he already had legitimate access to the area in his life. If he was already connected to the government of the Holy Knights, slipping into a meeting wouldn't really require stealth at all. Maybe he just needs to use a little bit Abyss Jelly to slip and slide through the fabric of space-time. And I kind of wonder if I could use Abyss Jelly when I start shaving when running. I don't know how it works, man. It just teleports. But his high fashion would also make sense if he were just born into the Celestial Dragon system, and it would also be another reason for him to just settle in the West Blue, since everyone connected to the CDs ends up in the West Blue apparently. Not to mention that the Demon Sheriff title feels very thematic for a man with his background up in heaven, the real hell of One Piece, especially opposite of Dofi, the Heavenly Demon. And kind of the connection to the real-world Lafitte brothers would at least give this some precedent and not feel super crazy out there, but it would still be a pretty wild twist if this is actually what's going on. Two identities, one operating in the criminal pirate world, the other operating within the system of power that's already established. However, this theory also does have some problems, as you can imagine. For example, when Lafitte appears at the Warlord meeting, Sengoku doesn't seem to recognize him. If Lafitte were secretly part of the Holy Knights or the Celestial Dragons in general, you might expect someone at that level to notice. Since, you know, we know that the Fleet Admiral should know about the Holy Knights thanks to Akainu, but I do guess that he doesn't necessarily need to know who they are individually, just that they exist as a group. But then there's also another issue here, at least for me, because narratively, the secret twin plot device might feel a little bit repetitive at this point, but hey, I mean, I wouldn't even be mad if it turns out to happen a third time. Lafitte the Spy. Now, my next idea kind of veers away from the brother angle a lot and more into Lafitte's real-life role later in life. So, instead of there being two Lafittes, Lafutes, whatever it is, what if there's only one, but he's actually a spy? More specifically, a spy planted inside the Blackbeard pirates by the world government. Now, at first this might sound a little bit out there because, yeah, it kind of is. Maybe I just move on to my next idea since this one makes no sense. Ha! Not! I deceived you. The same way that Lafitte may be deceiving his entire Yonko crew, because it actually does make perfect sense. Really think about this. Blackbeard himself is an extremely unusual figure already, right? The Gorosei know he has a connection to the mysterious Davy clan, something that at least you could fairly assume is what maybe allows him to wield multiple devil fruits, right? Not to mention that he's a member of the Worst Generation, a Yonko, and is also aiming to conquer Zawardo, right? So I really think it could make a lot of sense for the government to want to, you know, have someone closely monitoring him. I mean, sure, I guess, you know, they could just kill him, but Imu kind of seems to have some weird schemes going on, and Teach might just be part of their master plan. So they need a good plant, a buck, a Lafitte to carry that out. Let's face it, right? His entire design already screams theatrical, almost like a performer putting on an act. Is he wearing makeup? I guess so. Like his politeness, his exaggerated gestures, and even his clothing all make him look like someone who's already playing a role. Just look at Kanjuro during Wano, who's another perfect example of this type of thing having a precedent in One Piece, and honestly I kind of feel like Lafitte fits that very same vibe. His top hat, his tap dancing, his silly but very formal vibes, he does feel like an actor, a person whose entire personality is built on deception, acting as a character that they're actually not. Think of Lucci, a perfect skill set for a world government spy. And of course, when we go back to the historical Lafitte brothers, that connection becomes even stronger. Well, not quite, Burgess strong, but definitely stronger than stronger strong. These brothers famously shifted allegiances and worked as informants whenever it benefited them and whenever they needed a favor. They were pirates on the surface, but then spies behind the scenes, but then I guess maybe pirates or slave traders behind that. Not the best people, right? Not to mention, all of this would explain his stealth, his hypnotism powers, and his weird ability to track down one of the most untraceable characters in the story, a dragon. Even his role as a navigator for Blackbeard, it kind of feels like it could be subtle, deliberate foreshadowing of this man having a true role in the story as someone flexible, stealthy, and moving in the shadows. And again, I can't stress this enough, it feels at place with the Doflamingo title connection too. So at least to me, it all really fits really well. Lafitte could be a secret government plant prepping to unravel the Blackbeard pirates in the 11th hour when necessary. For a weird reason, I've had a lot of Naruto comparisons recently for One Piece, which I'm sorry about, but I do kind of feel like Lafitte might kind of play a similar role to Zetsu from Naruto, if you're familiar, a loyal member of the evil team who actually reveals his true nature as even darker than the supposed villain later on, working for the biggest bad, MU. Or what if Lafitte is even worse than Imu themselves? Lafitte the Puppetmaster. Alright, now this one might be the best and most chaotic of all. Here's the pitch. What if Lafitte isn't a spy for the government or has a secret twin? What if Lafitte is actually the real mastermind behind the entire Blackbeard pirate project? A puppet master playing some of the strongest pirates and criminals in the world like a finely tuned fiddle. But instead of Georgia, this devil went to the West Blue to manipulate Davy D. Teach into slaying God. Why on earth should that make sense, right? Well, I've not really delved into Lafitte's other role on the Blackbeard crew. He's a Titanic captain and the chief navigator, but he's also the chief of staff. It's a small title, but I think it's very heavy in its meaning. Since the Straw Hats don't have one, let me explain. It's a title that implies organization, oversight, and a lot of strategic coordination over the entire Blackbeard fleet, basically. All of Blackbeard's crew and allies rely on Lafitte to operate on a granular level. I mean, it does make a lot of sense when you look at him. He's just consistently the most composed and attentive member of the entire crew, while the others are loud, violent, impulsive. Lafitte is always calm and observant, and his words feel, well, manipulative, right? When you adjust the lens ever so slightly. He has an insane amount of respect for Blackbeard compared to the rest of the crew, threatening to slaughter Pizarro and diligently correcting the crew to call him by his new and proper titles. He's very detail-oriented, and he makes sure to always put Teach on the pedestal, constantly reinforcing his role as the boss and his overall authority. But that behavior could very much also be interpreted in a much shadier way if we wanted to. Sometimes, the easiest way to control a powerful leader is to encourage their ego. There's actually a concept called idealize, devalue, discard, that explores this very concept of a temporary pedestal phenomenon. It's a type of social engineering that is used to dominate someone, typically by a narcissist, right? Which would fit very well with the idea, I think, that Lafitte could be a celestial dragon. People who of course think, quite frankly, that their own shit doesn't stink. By constantly reaffirming how great Teach is, Lafitte could subtly be steering the crew from behind the scenes without ever being noticed. Also, so he can actually guide Teach in the direction that he wants, navigating the captain himself and the entire Enterprise. So is there a precedent for Lafitte's character at all? Absolutely. And it's actually just straight up his past history of abusing authority as the demon sheriff suddenly becoming extremely relevant when you consider this specific possibility. The story that Tsuro described in chapter 234 here painted Lafitte as someone who once controlled an entire population through fear and manipulation. Also, like, it's such a dense and important chapter just by itself, honestly. It's got the Blackbeard crew reveal, Shanks starting his meeting with Whitebeard, and the introduction of a bunch of the warlords. It's just a very deep lore chapter for real, man. And if something like this dropped in the current, story, like, I don't know, like in the year 2026 or something, people would go absolutely insane. I guess One Piece didn't have quite the traction back then, but what a crazy big chapter. Kind of beside the point, I guess. It's still clear that Lafitte was someone who was eventually exiled for going too far, abusing their powers of control. And I kind of doubt that habit was broken when he just randomly met Teach. So what if Lafitte was actually once part of the Celestial Dragons, but was actually cast out for abusing his powers? And now he's coming for the top, and he's orchestrating the Blackbeard pirates to do so, since they all have different reasons to slay the government. Honestly, Lafitte just really feels like the guy who may just be trying to go full scorched earth because he was exiled once from the rank of the Holy Knights. I think it would be an absolute psychotic reveal for Lafitte to be using and steering Blackbeard as nothing else but a tool, preying on his power, his drive, and his thirst for vengeance to achieve the same goal, conquering the world itself. Not the final villain, but almost like a parasite steering a much larger beast. Now, do I think genuinely that Lafitte is secretly the final ultimate villain of One Piece? Probably not. I think that Teach would catch on to it at some point, or Emu, Garling, or Shamrock would. But then again, could Lafitte be a massive curveball character who suddenly disrupts the balance of power in the final saga? Absolutely, because if Lafitte turns out to be a spy, a twin, a celestial dragon, or just the secret puppet master pulling the strings behind Blackbeard, well then the entire structure of the entire Blackbeard pirates could collapse in one fell swoop. But will the leader let that happen? I mean, Oda has been showing us more of the sad side of Blackbeard recently with his tragic childhood. I sure did learn a lot of new stuff about him recently, and if you want to understand truly everything there is to know right now about Blackbeard, you should really watch this video right here to learn everything about the heir of the Davy clan. And with that being said, thanks for watching. Thanks so much to all of our fantastic Patreons. Random, but if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you watch regularly, why not do that? And I will see you in the next video.